The storm was a banshee that night, howling its fury against the old Victorian house on Willow Creek. Rain lashed against the windows, a relentless drumbeat that masked the initial splintering of wood. Sarah, curled up in bed with a worn copy of Jane Eyre, didn't hear it. Only the sudden, bone-chilling creak of the floorboards above jolted her upright. A primal fear, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. The old house groaned in the wind, but this creak was different. Localized, deliberate. Sarah, alone in her grandmother's house for the weekend, listened, her breath catching in her lungs. Another creak, closer now, followed by the unmistakable thud of a footfall. Panic surged through her. Granny had warned her about the boarded-up attic, a place untouched since her grandfather's passing years ago. But the storm, the isolation, it all seemed to conspire against logic. Still, the terror in her gut wouldn't be ignored. Sarah scrambled out of bed, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the kitchen, its weight a cold comfort in her trembling hand. Her eyes darted around the dimly lit room, searching for escape routes. The back door was too risky, exposed to the elements. Her only option was the attic access panel, a small square cut into the living room ceiling. With a strength born of desperation, she clambered onto an armchair and pushed against the panel. It didn't budge. The frustration, a spark in the growing darkness of her fear, ignited a new resolve. She grabbed a nearby poker and slammed it repeatedly against the wood. The old house groaned again, but this time with a satisfying crack. The panel gave way, revealing a gaping hole into the inky blackness above. The stench of dust and something else, something rotten, assaulted her senses. Sarah, tears pricking her eyes, squeezed through the opening. She dragged the heavy panel shut behind her, leaving her in the suffocating darkness. The floorboards above were weak, groaning under every step. Sarah, her back pressed against the slanted roof, inched forward on her hands and knees. Cobwebs brushed against her face, sending shivers down her spine. The air grew colder, and a faint, rhythmic dripping echoed in the distance. A sound, unmistakable this time, stopped her cold. A low, guttural growl, emanating from somewhere deeper in the attic's labyrinth. Sarah froze, her breath held captive in her lungs. The growl came again, closer, followed by the unmistakable scrape of something heavy being dragged across the floorboards. Panic clawed at her again, but this time, it was laced with a chilling certainty. This wasn't a human intruder. This was something else entirely. A primal terror, the kind etched in the DNA of prey, choked her. The house, once a familiar haven, was now a tomb, and she, its terrified prisoner. The scraping came again, closer still, and a faint slithering sound accompanied it. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, but the image of something monstrous, serpentine, slithered into her mind. She fumbled in her pocket, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of her phone. A sliver of hope, a desperate lifeline to the world outside. The screen flickered on, illuminating the dusty floorboards and a trail of dark, viscous liquid leading towards her. Sarah's scream, a primal shriek of terror, tore through the storm and the house. But it was a scream lost in the howling wind and the deafening drumming of rain. The phone slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floorboards. In the dim light, she saw it. Coiled on the floor, its body a grotesque amalgamation of scales and glistening flesh, was the creature. It raised its head, eyes like burning embers reflecting the faint glow of the phone. In that moment, Sarah knew a primal truth, one whispered in the forgotten corners of her mind. This house wasn't just haunted. It was a prison, and the creature, a monstrous guardian. The creature lunged, its long, sinuous body whipping through the air. Sarah, fueled by sheer terror, scrambled back, her head hitting a rough wooden beam. Stars exploded in her vision, but adrenaline kept her moving. She scrambled for an escape route, finding a dusty window at the far end of the attic. With a burst of strength, she threw open the latch. The wind roared, tearing at her clothes and whipping rain into her face. But it was a blessed relief, a taste of freedom. She clambered onto the narrow windowsill, the storm a raging inferno around her. Below, the sheer drop to the overgrown garden seemed insurmountable. But the creature, slithering after her, made the choice clear. Taking a shuddering breath, Sarah launched herself out of the window. Though the fall felt like an eternity. Wind clawed at her, ripping the breath from her lungs. She landed with a bone-jarring thud, the impact stealing the air from her completely. Pain flared through her ankle, a sharp, insistent scream. But she didn't have time for it. Not yet. Scrambling to her knees, she forced herself to her feet, ignoring the throbbing in her ankle. The creature, a monstrosity silhouetted against the lightning-streaked sky, hissed in frustration at the window. It was too large to fit through, its grotesque form writhing with thwarted fury. Adrenaline fueled Sarah's steps. She stumbled towards the edge of the garden, the storm a raging torrent around her. She needed to get to the shed. Granny always kept an old phone there for emergencies. It was a long shot, but it was her only hope. The distance seemed to stretch on forever. Each gust of wind threatened to topple her over, the rain blurring her vision. Suddenly, the earth gave way beneath her foot, and she plunged into a muddy ditch. The pain in her ankle intensified, a white-hot agony that sent tears streaming down her face. Sobbing, she clawed her way out of the ditch, her clothes soaked and clinging to her body. But then, salvation came into view. The shed, a small, rickety structure, loomed through the rain. Hope, a flickering ember, ignited within her. With a final burst of strength, she stumbled towards it, ignoring the searing pain in her ankle. The shed door creaked open with a rusty groan, and she stumbled inside. It was cramped and dark, filled with the smell of damp earth and old tools. But in the corner, Sarah spotted it, a dusty rotary phone hanging on the wall. Scrambling, she fumbled with the receiver. The line crackled with static, filled with the ghostly echoes of the storm. But then, a voice, a lifeline. A gruff, sleepy voice that spoke of the sheriff's department. Sarah, her throat raw, poured out her story in a torrent of words. The storm raged for another hour, the old house groaning under its assault. But inside the attic, the creature remained, its frustrated hisses echoing in the darkness. Sarah, shivering in the cold embrace of the shed, listened to the promise of help on the other end of the phone. It was a fragile hope, but it was all she had. By the time the first rays of dawn peeked through the storm clouds, the rain had subsided. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sound that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Two officers, faces etched with concern, found her huddled inside the shed. Her ankle, sprained but not broken, throbbed with pain. Yet, there was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. The search of the old house was fruitless. Nothing was found in the attic. The boarded-up entrance remained unbroken, the creature seemingly vanished without a trace. The officers, skeptical but kind, promised to file a report, to keep an eye out for anything unusual. But Sarah knew that something lurked within the old house, something ancient and monstrous. It might have retreated for now, but it was still there, a dark guardian in a forgotten attic. Leaving the house behind, Sarah cast one last look at Willow Creek. It was no longer a familiar haven, but a chilling reminder of the night she faced a horror older than time itself. The experience left an indelible mark on Sarah. Gone was the naive girl who once believed in ghosts. In her place stood a woman hardened by terror, forever haunted by the echoes of a creature's hiss and the knowledge that some secrets are better left buried. The house on Willow Creek remained, a silent sentinel against the backdrop of a seemingly peaceful town. But for Sarah, the storm would forever rage within its walls, a chilling testament to the horror she encountered on a night of howling wind and slithering shadows.